Welcome back to Milan Soccer Club. We are so glad to be back for our first show of 2026. And wow, we're kicking things off by dissecting that frustrating 1-1 draw against Genoa. After the break, we were all hoping for a fresh start, right? But this felt all too familiar. It felt like we've seen this movie before, and it's a recurring issue that we really need to unpack. And honestly, grotesque really is the perfect word for it. It was just a strange, frustrating, and, let's be real, an ultimately disappointing match that kind of summed up some of Milan's biggest weaknesses. Okay, let's dive into this.
Right, so the final score doesn't tell the whole story. Not even close. In fact, if you only looked at the numbers, you'd think Milan had an absolutely dominant victory. Now, what's really interesting here is the massive disparity in attacking output. I mean, look at this. 61% possession. Okay, 32 shots. And an XG, an expected goals, of over 2. And yet, we only found the net once? It just doesn't add up.
32. Let's just sit with that number for a second. 32 attempts on goal. It shows a team that can absolutely create pressure, no doubt about it. But it also screams that we lack that clinical edge to actually make it count. And then there's this number, the only number that truly matters at the end of the day. 1. Just 1 goal. This inefficiency, especially against teams that just sit back and defend, has become a really worrying pattern. Which, of course, leads us directly to the most divisive player on the pitch, Rafael Leao. The whole debate around him perfectly illustrates the team's current identity crisis. And you can see the paradox right here. On one hand, you've got the constant criticism about his attitude, his role, that he's not a true striker. But on the other hand, you have the cold, hard data that shows he's an elite offensive contributor in this league, first in shots, fourth in expected goals. So what's the real story? And you have to wonder, right? He's not a traditional center forward who thrives with his back to goal. We know that. Yet that's so often the role he's forced into. So this builds into the bigger tactical problems we're seeing. Exactly. The issue isn't just one player, it's the entire system struggling against a very specific, and I have to say, very effective defensive strategy that Genoa used against us. And that's what it was. Genoa's coach, De Rossi, he effectively built a wall. I mean, they created this super compact, disciplined defensive block that Milan they just couldn't break it down. And this just brilliantly illustrates their game plan. They took away the center of the park completely. They neutralized our width by sticking to our wingbacks, and then they basically dared us to just cross the ball into their strongest defenders over and over again. And you know what? It works perfectly.
It's crystal clear Allegri needs to inject some variety here. The same old approach isn't cutting it. So based on the analysis, there are 2 pretty clear adjustments that could be made, with the current squad.
So first, give the new signing Miklas Füllkrug a starting role. Use him as a proper target man, a physical presence to occupy those defenders. That alone would create space for guys like Leao and Pulisic. And second, bring more creativity into the midfield to help break down these low blocks and take some pressure off Modric. Yeah, and while those internal tweaks can definitely help, the real long-term solution, that might lie outside the current squad. We're talking about finding a true world-class goal scorer in the transfer market. The team needs a pure finalizer, a poacher, a player whose one job is to put the ball in the back of the net. A name like Dusan Vlahovic, for example, fits this profile perfectly. But here's the thing, acquiring a player like that would mean committing to a whole new style of play, one that's built entirely around serving him. So ultimately, this result leaves us with a really critical question. How do we see this? Do we see it as a fortunate point saved late on, or as 2 crucial points just dropped against a weaker side? Because how the team and the coach respond to this challenge, that's what's going to show us whether they're true title contenders or if they're just destined to repeat the same old mistakes. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.